Welcome to this information session on school exclusions with SEND and U. SEND and U provide the special educational needs and disability information, advice and support service for families in Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire. This session is aimed at parents and carers to help increase your awareness of the current legislation around school suspensions and exclusions, which will in turn hopefully build your confidence in working with your child's school to address issues. This presentation primarily draws on the most recent statutory guidance for school staff on suspension and permanent exclusions from maintained schools, academies and PRUs in England, including pupil movement, which is issued by the Department for Education. This will be referred to as the guidance and brings together key legislation from the Education and Inspections Act, the Education Act and the School Discipline Regulations. The presentation will also draw on elements from the Equality Act 2010. However, for quick reference, there's a helpful guide for parents which summarises key components of the statutory guidance, which you can find in the link on the top of this slide. The terminology around exclusions changes from time to time, but the current legislation describes a suspension as a short-term or temporary removal from school, whereas a permanent exclusion is when a child is not allowed back to the school. Only a head can issue an exclusion, and they can only be issued for behaviour in line with their own school behaviour policies. A maximum of 45 days of suspensions in 1 year can be issued, but only in extreme circumstances can a suspension be extended into a permanent exclusion. This usually only happens where new evidence comes to light during the suspension period. A permanent exclusion should only be used when a serious or persistent breach of the school's behaviour policy has been made, and where allowing the pupil to remain at school would harm the education or welfare of others in the school. There are some general duties set out in the guidance which all schools should adhere to. As stated in the Equality Act, schools are required to make reasonable adjustments for disabled pupils. Schools must also use their best endeavours to ensure the appropriate special educational provision is made for pupils with special educational needs, or SEN, which will include any support in relation to behaviour management that they need because of their SEN. Schools should engage proactively with parents in supporting the behaviour of pupils with any additional needs. Schools should have a reintegration strategy and offer a reintegration meeting for the child and parent following any suspension. And finally, schools should review with external professionals where appropriate what support is needed. And if appropriate, consider if an EHC or Education, Health and Care needs assessment is needed. If your child has received a suspension, parents should try to ensure that any schoolwork set is completed and returned to the school, and that you arrange somewhere for your child to be looked after during school hours, as your child should not be in a public place without a good reason. You may also like to check that a reintegration meeting has been offered, and if so, ensure that your child's views are considered as far as they're able to share them, and that you have been invited to participate. Any plan going forward from a suspension should be seen as a fresh start for your child. The school's behaviour and SEN policies should be available on the school website. Please do check these and consider whether you feel the school has taken all of the necessary steps in their policies, as well as the steps set out in the exclusions guidance. Consider any questions you have in advance of the reintegration meeting. If you have concerns about or are not sure what SEN support is being offered, it can be helpful to write to the head teacher and request a review meeting with the SEN coordinator or SENCO. If your child is suspended for more than 5 days, you can ask to attend the governor's review meeting, or if your child is being repeatedly suspended, you can put your views in writing to the school governors and ask them to review the head teacher's decision or consider what further action or support they can offer. Finally, if your child has an Education, Health and Care Plan, or EHCP, this should ideally be reviewed with the local authority and the school to discuss what additional adjustments or support may be needed to prevent further suspensions. All schools should have a reintegration strategy, which should be clearly communicated at the reintegration meeting before or at the beginning of a pupil's return to school. During a reintegration meeting, the school should communicate to the pupil that they are valued and that their previous behaviour should not be seen as an obstacle for future success. Where possible, this meeting should include parents. Where necessary, schools should work with relevant staff and multi-agency organisations, such as other teachers, pastoral staff, mentors, social workers, education psychologists, or the Safer School team, to identify if the pupil has any SEN and/or health needs. Do remember that you can request an additional meeting with the SENCO if one has not already been offered, asking to review the SEN support that may or may not already be in place. If they have not already done so, you may also wish to ask the school if they can seek any advice from outside professionals to gain more information on how to support your child's needs. We'll now discuss alternative provision and when this should be provided. The local authority have a duty under Section 19 of the Education Act to provide suitable education for children who may not be receiving education for a period of time due to illness, exclusion, or otherwise. If your child has been suspended for more than 5 days or permanently excluded, they are entitled to suitable alternative education. The duty is to provide suitable education. This means it must meet your child's special educational needs. If it's a fixed term suspension, that means for a set number of days, the school must arrange the provision. When a pupil of compulsory school age is suspended from a pupil referral unit or PRU, the local authority must arrange suitable full-time education. For permanent exclusions, the home local authority becomes responsible to arrange suitable full-time education from the 6th day after the permanent exclusion took place. The guidance now makes clear that any school must notify the local authority about all suspensions and exclusions, regardless of their length. And when a pupil has an EHC plan, as well as arranging alternative provision, a review of the EHCP or a reassessment of the pupil's needs should be considered. We'll now take a look at the use of part-time timetables or reduced timetables in conjunction with exclusions. The guidance says under paragraph 29 that a part-time timetable should not be used to manage a pupil's behaviour and must only be in place for the shortest time necessary. Any pastoral support programme or other agreement should have a time limit by which point the pupil is expected to attend full-time, either at school or alternative provision. There should also be formal arrangements in place for regularly reviewing it with the pupil and their parents. In agreeing to a part-time timetable, a school has agreed to a pupil being absent from school for part of the week or day, and therefore must treat absence as authorised. If your child's school is proposing a part-time timetable but you are not keen, you can refuse by putting it in writing to the school in a constructive way and asking for a follow-up meeting to plan support going forwards. Sometimes a part-time timetable can be helpful to reset situations and allow a child time out, but do bear in mind there should be a clear plan to reintegrate full-time as soon as possible. Alternatively, or perhaps additionally, remember the duty that the local authority have to provide suitable education where a child is otherwise not receiving it. So you could alert the local authority and the school and ask whether alternative provision could be provided. Schools must formally notify a parent of any decision to suspend or exclude a pupil. This can include electronic notifications such as text or email if the parent carer has agreed to receive notifications in this way. The school must make accurate records of the reason for the exclusion. If the school does not follow all of the necessary steps, the exclusion could be considered unlawful. The guidance says that any exclusion for a pupil even for short periods of time, must be formally recorded. It would also be unlawful to exclude a pupil simply because they have SEN or a disability that the school feels unable to meet, or for a reason such as academic attainment or ability, or the failure of a pupil to meet specific conditions before they are reinstated, such as to attend a reintegration meeting. Off-rolling is described by Ofsted as the practice of a school removing a pupil from a school role in the perceived interests of the school rather than the pupil. This is unlawful, and a complaint can be raised if this is perceived to be happening. If you feel that an action taken has not been lawful, you can use the checklist on the IPSIA website to ensure the exclusion process was followed correctly. Use your right to make parental representations about the suspension or exclusion and challenge any part of the process that you believe has not been lawful. Finally, be aware that choosing to remove a pupil from the school role to electively home educate must be the parent's decision and cannot be enforced by the school for non-disciplinary reasons. If you feel that you are being off-rolled, you can make a complaint to the school and the local authority or the trust, or even to Ofsted. Managed moves are often used as an alternative to permanent exclusion, and it is the process of moving a child from one school to another. They are a voluntary agreement between two schools, a child and their parent, and should only occur when they are in the child's best interests. They can be helpful if another school is identified as having resources or provision that may better suit the pupil's needs, or where a fresh start due to relationship or community difficulties would be a positive move for the child. If your child's school has proposed a move and you are in agreement, do ask to meet with the proposed school and fact-find about the support they can provide. If you disagree with a proposed move, but the school continues to enforce it, you can make a formal complaint to challenge the decision using the school's complaints procedure, because it should be a voluntary agreement. Directing off-site is another strategy that schools can use to support behaviour. This is where a pupil is referred to another educational setting for some or all of their education, usually short-term, for the purpose of improving their behaviour. In many cases, this would be a pupil referral unit or PRU. The guidance makes clear that directing education off-site in this instance is for the purpose of improving future behaviour rather than punishing the past. Maintained schools only have the power to make this decision. The legislation does not apply to academies, so although they can propose an off-site direction, academies cannot insist on this step. When a school has decided to direct a child off-site, they must write and tell you about this, setting out where and when the placement will be, for how long, and the purpose of the direction. You can check that the school has formally notified you in line with the regulations on the IPSIA website here. Research the placement and consider whether the proposed placement is able to meet any special educational needs that your child has. And if your child has an EHCP, notify the local authority and ask for an interim review if the full annual one is not yet due. When a child has been suspended or excluded, the guidance says that the governing board has a duty to consider parents' representations about them. The requirements on a governing board to consider the reinstatement of a suspended or permanently excluded pupil depend on a number of factors. There is a helpful flowchart on page 38 of the guidance that can help with understanding the steps to be taken in relation to your situation. For suspensions exceeding 5 days or a permanent exclusion, parents have the right to make written representations to the governing body if you do not agree with the reasons for the exclusion. Parents also have a right to attend a meeting with the governing body and should be notified about this in writing. The governing body can either uphold the exclusion or direct reinstatement with the school. do consider what outcome you would want to see, but also consider the possibility that the process can make continuing relationships with the school difficult. The pupil also has the right to make their own representations, if appropriate for their age and understanding. Please take a look at our Exclusions resource for tips on what to consider when putting together your views. You can find the link at the end of this presentation. Where a pupil has been permanently excluded and the governing body have declined to reinstate them, the family can request that the exclusion be heard by an independent review panel or IRP. The IRP does not have the power to overturn the decision, but can assess whether the decision was taken procedurally fair and tell the governing body to consider their decision. Whether or not a school recognises a pupil as having SEN, parents can ask for an SEN expert to attend the review meeting. We advise reading the full guidance if you are considering requesting an IRP. We hope you found this session useful, but for further information, you may wish to see our website resources, where you can find further information on reasonable adjustments, judicial review, and our updated suspension and exclusions toolkit, which includes guidance on making parental representation to the governing board and disability discrimination. Thank you.